Learning Ally is a proud sponsor of the Empowered Dyslexia podcast. Learning Ally, a nonprofit education organization, helps to transform the lives of struggling learners by delivering proven solutions that help students reach their potential. We have a heritage of supporting students with a reading deficit like dyslexia. Our award-winning human-read audiobook solution helps students in grades 3 through 12 access books they want and need to read to help them succeed. Visit www.learningally.org for more information.
The following content is not intended as a substitute for professional legal advice, medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always seek the advice of your attorney, advocate, physician, or other qualified health provider with any questions you may have regarding any medical or educational concerns.
Hello and welcome to Empowered Dyslexia Student Edition. This is a show for us, by us. I'm your host, Asher Yearout. You may know my dad as the host of Empowered Dyslexia and is just finishing up his second season. I have seen how much this show has helped others and how important the information is for parents and teachers. This is why I insisted on doing Empowered Dyslexia Student Edition. We need to know what is going on and why. We need to be able to speak about dyslexia to our friends and family members and teachers and the experts in the field. Our goal on the show is for them to be able to speak to us and not at us. Speak to us so that we understand what's going on and to meet us where we are at. Please make sure to like us on Facebook, subscribe to our YouTube channel, write us a review, especially if you like us. You can get all of our podcasts on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and Google Play, Spotify, Stitcher, Alexa-enabled devices, AnyPod, TuneIn, iHeartRadio, you name it, we got it. Today's topic is dyslexia and what it looks like in school. Welcome to Empowered Dyslexia Student Edition. Today, our guest is hands down one of the most entertaining and best speakers when it comes to explaining dyslexia and ADHD. She graduated from the University of Oklahoma with a Bachelor in Art in Early Childhood Development and graduated at Dallas Baptist University with a Master of Arts in Teaching. Welcome, Miss Nancy Disterlic.
Hello, thanks for having me on the show.
You're welcome. Tell me just a little bit about yourself.
Well, first of all, thank you for having me because I've been able to watch your progress and hear about your successes. So it's nice to be here and interviewed by you. My past is kind of funny because in the state that I was raised in, we didn't really recognize dyslexia. So I wasn't able to know that that was what was going on. I was just always frustrated. And it was when I became a parent that I was working with my son and kept seeing him struggle and not understanding why. And then once I knew it was dyslexia, I became an advocate. And I was like, if teachers knew this, if parents knew this, we could have helped our kids earlier. So that's kind of my journey on how I went from being dyslexic myself into how I can help other teachers and grow them.
That's very strong story, just how you didn't know what was going on and now you do. And now you're helping others figure out what might be going on that they don't know.
Yeah.
What is your, I know you were a teacher at one point. What's your teaching background?
Yeah, it's kind of funny. I went into just being in elementary education and wanted to be a classroom teacher, stay in that classroom from that point on, retire from that room. And so I invested a lot in that class. And I found that I was helpful to kids that struggled, and it wasn't just reading, but if they struggled in different areas, I enjoyed, I liked your quote at the beginning, meeting them where they were at and finding the appropriate support for them. And so many of the students who came through my classroom, I'd say, hey, I think that one needs to be tested for dyslexia. And at that time, we kind of waited till third grade to assess for dyslexia, and I was a second and first grade teacher. But eventually, my principal's like, you've got a nice track record here. So they were starting to identify more kids. And the dyslexia teacher came to me and said, you should become a dyslexia therapist. And I went, no. Because I at that time didn't know I had dyslexia. I was just like, this is not my favorite area of phonics. So she strongly encouraged it. And when I went to my very first training, literally tears kept coming down my face because I had no idea how much I struggled with phonics. And I thought about all the kids that I had taught, really cute, like fun, like it says I was entertaining. You know, I got my kids' attention, I do fun things, but I didn't know that there's actually rules and strategies that I could have taught my kids to be more successful. And I was like, every teacher needs to know this.
I feel like that's something that could have helped me because, you know, I was identified in late 7th grade, and that pretty much from then to 9th to freshman year, I struggled.
Mm-hmm.
You know, barely passing English class.
Well, may I add something to that? Because it's funny that you should say that. When I became a dyslexia therapist, they placed me in high school. And I'm an elementary teacher. I was like, you do not want an elementary teacher up in high school, right? But I found it was different because these kids had struggled so much in school. Some of the strategies and techniques that an elementary teacher would use was very beneficial to these high school students, and they actually appreciated it.
Yeah. I feel like if I wouldn't have been taking intervention, that would have been very useful for me because, you know, I wasn't going to go through remediation until we met Dr. Conway, but that would have helped me just along with my accommodations to try to have some better strategies to go on. But
I agree.
what made you decide to move out of the classroom and to go into the dyslexia?
Well, it's kind of interesting because whenever you're a classroom teacher, you have all these kids and there's just never enough time.
Mm-hmm.
And it was really beautiful. I kept telling my kids I hated to be a recruiter, but I was like, you guys are going to love dyslexia therapy because you get to work one-on-one and watch those kids make that progress and those gains. And any teacher who gets into the field, that moment where a kid goes, oh, you're like, yeah. So I loved having that one-on-one with those kids and having the right skills and strategies to help them. Like I was able to show them the rules, show them how to move their mouth, tell them what's voiced. It was a whole nother level of teaching a child how to read, and I absolutely loved that experience.
So the one-on-one for the hour
Mm-hmm.
and 30-minute time was very beneficiary to the student because you didn't have to worry about, you know, Johnny getting more help, and, you know, you had that one-on-one kind of connection, I guess you could say.
I think that's the perfect word. Yeah, sure.
That you pretty much could grow at
Absolutely.
a faster rate than if you were in a classroom of 30.
Absolutely. And we're not taking grades and we're not handing out PTA forms. We get to absolutely focus that time with the direct instruction on what that student needs. And so you really get to see that progress in that student. And they're gaining confidence because they're finally getting what they needed that the classroom environment may not be able to directly teach. And so they're getting what they need inside of school.
How do you think we can help teachers become a little bit more educated about dyslexia and any other learning disability that they may not be about?
You know, that's another great question, Asher, because there's so many different ways and levels that we can support teachers in knowing about it. And we had mentioned before that until something directly affects you, you might not have the passion for it. And so we want to make sure that our teachers, they've got these kids in their classrooms. And my favorite thing is to tell the teachers, if you have a kid in your room that you wish you could do more for, and you know that they are intelligent, but they're just lazy, I know how I can help you, because if you can see, and these are the 3 things I tell my students and teachers, what you really see is their creativity, their intelligence, and their character. The reason why you think lazy is they're not producing when they interact with print. So it's when you ask them to write or you're asking them to read, these kids are not wanting to be connected to you. And so when we tell those teachers, if the more you know about dyslexia and other disabilities, the more you can better serve and appropriately accommodate these kids, you see more progress in your room, which is what they want. We also want to look at our colleges, because I know when I went to school, I think there's maybe a little tiny paragraph about dyslexia, and it just said that the students struggle to read. But dyslexia, I know, also has to do with language processing, and it has to do with, like, I will confuse Tuesday and Thursday when I'm saying the words. I know the difference, but those are the type of things that if teachers don't recognize or some of their characteristics, they don't know how to support the kids. So we have awareness at the college level. We have awareness on our campus, and I'm very proud of the state of Texas because we've done a fantastic job by having one of the first handbooks. And so most of our teachers are aware of dyslexia. They're becoming more knowledgeable about the characteristics and how to support and early identify kids.
What I felt that really hit home was about you saying laziness in the classroom, and a lot of time it isn't laziness. It's the fact that, you know, you might not know how to do it, and you may just, oh, he's lazy, he doesn't want to do the work. Most of the time it is I don't know how to do this work.
Right.
It is, you know, read this paragraph and answer these questions. Or if I can't even read, how am I going to ever answer the questions? And if I just write some random answers, you're going to call me lazy because I didn't read it.
Right.
And, you know, that's what, I was never called lazy, but that's kind of how it kind of hit home for me, because that's kind of what happened in like 7th and 8th grade, that, like I didn't know, I was having a very hard time reading, and, you know, writing stars. I was getting very low grades on my writing papers, and you might just think I just didn't care.
Right. And eventually the kids don't, because they're like, I did try my best. And I tell my teachers, I was like, none of you would outright call a kid lazy. Let me tell you how you tell a kid he's lazy. You know, I really need you to concentrate on your paper. I need you to pay attention better. You know, when I passed that out, I needed you to follow the directions. When the student was paying attention, they were following the directions to the best of their ability, and they were giving their best effort. So the teacher might not use that word, but we indicate to the student that they're not meeting our expectation. So what I'm trying to reframe the teachers is, behavior is the number one way for a student to tell an adult, I'm not okay. So as soon as I have a kid who's pulling away, who's shutting down and not doing as I expect, that's my role as the adult to come to the child and say, let's kind of walk through this assignment. Did you feel like it was too lengthy? Did I explain it to you correctly? And I can walk through with my student what their needs are so I can appropriately support them. And that's hard, but we want our teachers, that's why I'm always like, if you have a student there that you're like, you know that there's more potential than what they're producing, we the adults need to make sure we're asking good questions.
Yeah, and I feel like that's a lot of times that they're not lazy. They're really trying their hardest, and whenever you come up and say, I need you to get on task, it's kind of like, oh, why should I even do this anymore? There's no point of even doing it, because
Right.
you know, I've been trying to get through this, and if I don't understand how to do this, and I maybe feel shy or feel uncomfortable or embarrassed asking the teacher, how do you do this?
Well, that's the other thing I noticed once they put me in high school. My students aren't going to raise their hand in front of their classmates. And they've got to get to the other class, because if they're late, then the teacher's going to call them out for that. There was never that time built in for them to get what they needed. And so actually at our high school, we had a transition class. And that's where my kids got to ask those questions and have the clarification and feel more confident. And we got to build that structure for them, because you're absolutely right, Asher. That's what the kids will do, is they just get quiet, reclusive. And what my strategy was, is I look around, you know, what page are people on, or where are we supposed to be? And it's not that I wasn't paying attention to my teacher. I processed at a rate that was slower than the speed of the class.
Yeah, I've done that.
Not that I wasn't smart enough to take it. It was the rate.
I've done that countless number of
Yeah.
times. Just like, I don't know what's going on. I'm looking around, see. Or one thing I remember, like sometimes we like go to use Springboard books, and I don't know what pit. I don't know what we're doing. So I was looking around, looking at what people was doing, and making sure I look like when I'm doing something.
Right.
Because 9 times out of 10, I didn't know what, you know, it's not like I'm not being lazy. I don't I can't comprehend the words on the paper, and if I'm supposed to read this article or this story
Right.
and then answer these questions, if I can't even get through the first page and the time she gives us to read the story, at that point you're just like, whatever.
Or I'm concentrating so hard to keep up with the class. I'm only on sentence 3 and they finished, so she's ready for questions, and so now I'm behind again. And so you're absolutely right. And so I want to empower my kids to recognize what they need in the classroom. That's why I'm such a advocate for audiobooks, because you can quickly put on, like Learning Ally in the state of Texas, we have our curriculum on Learning Ally, and we've partnered with the state. So they can have that book, they can be listening to it in the time frame the teacher asked, and be engaged and ready for the question. So there's solutions out there that we need to educate our teachers and our students how to use them, so they don't have that feeling, and the teacher's not like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
We're like, we're trying to keep up.
And I feel like that's one very beneficial thing that came out of this virtual learning, is that, like, for us, Springboard has all, no matter who you are, they have audio, like a professional person that reads the book and has the story. So it's good for people like me that, if, I'm being, I wouldn't say distracted. I guess another thing you could say, being distracted by, my brothers or people on the Google Meet call, I can put on my headphones, listen to it, get it done in 5 minutes instead of 15 minutes, and then be ready for when the teacher is ready for calling on students for the questions that we're supposed to be answering.
And we've heard teachers are hesitant about enabling students. And again, my favorite word in this show, that you empower them when they can keep up with the content. So we're not looking at their decoding skills right now. We're wanting to know their intellect and their creativity and their assimilation and their higher level thinking right now. So go ahead and let them have an audiobook where they need one. And then we can work on their decoding skills over here. So it's a great example of how students are more engaged when we give them appropriate support inside of a classroom.
Yes. I've noticed that I've been more engaged in the classroom, just in the sense of that I am able to watch a video, or, sitting inside the classroom, listening to the teacher have a lecture. You're going to get distracted easily by, your friend over there talking to you, or somebody tapping their pencil. But now it's more, everyone is quiet. There's no noise. It's just the teacher talking. And if you have headphones on, it's really hard for you to get distracted and go, what's Johnny doing over here? You listen to the teacher and you get the lesson done, and then you move on to your next class.
I agree with that.
And to kind of go along with that, with the educate, the recognition of dyslexia, and to have not just with teachers, but with the community, people, like recognition with families, and because a lot of kids, they just think they're just not as smart, and that's just not the case. They learn at a different rate than everyone else, and if you're learning at a different rate, let's say a slower rate, then you're going to be behind. You're going to think you're not as smart as everyone else in the classroom. How can we get more recognition, more testing for kids that may have dyslexia or any other learning disability?
Well, again, I hate to just keep tooting the horn of Texas, but we are a leader in our state, in the other states. And one of the most important thing that we're doing is we're emphasizing early identification. What we used to do is say, let's give kids the opportunity to learn before we label. And so they wanted them to have that learning environment and be exposed to reading, and then maybe around third grade we test. But what we've learned is that widens that gap, because we want to identify kids at risk earlier while they're learning to read. And so in the state of Texas, we have screeners, and we're identifying kids earlier. Moving them towards identification and giving them the appropriate supports so that they're ready, and we lessen that gap. The other thing that we do for awareness is when the students come to a dyslexia class, we don't want to just talk about the print disability. We want to talk about their strengths. And we also want to talk about how dyslexia affects them, and that it can manifest itself differently in different students, and how they might need to accommodate themselves and be supported. And my favorite analogy with that is I tell them about glasses. So I wear glasses, and I have since I was 7. And when I met you the first time, I did not say, "Oh, Asher, I'm so sorry. I have poor vision. My apology. I'm so sorry that I can't see." Someone who wears braces, they would never apologize that their teeth needed straightened by braces. And so somehow with dyslexia, we've got a shame factor that we don't read or process at the rate of often our peers. And so kids feel embarrassed and that they have to cover it up. And so what I tell my students is, if I chose not to wear my glasses, I would owe you an apology if I bumped into you or I couldn't read the prompt. So I have to own that I have something that I need to be responsible for. And I want my students with dyslexia to recognize they have something to own, but they don't have something they have to be ashamed of or embarrassed by. So even I had to take my own advice. And the word that I phrased myself, and I said it to a student one time, and I was like, I'm going to start saying that to myself. I don't mind being uncomfortably confident. So if I come to a situation where I'm like, oh, wow, this is going to take me a while to read, I don't owe you an apology that I need some more time. And I teach my students to start being confident inside themselves. I'm like, you know what? The teacher's going to understand as soon as you advocate for yourself and you take responsibility for it. But we've seen so many kids who the accommodations in the classroom, the teachers might not exactly know how or have been trained to support. And the students weren't taught how to use their accommodation. They know they have access to it. So that disconnect causes our kids to maybe withdraw and our teachers not give appropriate support. So we are still, I love saying that doctors are practicing medicine and teachers are constantly improving. So we are constantly getting better at what we do. And we will continue this show right here. Look at where we are. I mean, I'm from the 70s when we didn't even talk about it, and here you've got a show about it, and you're a young person already advocating, so look where we've come. And we still have more to go. But I love that you have this platform to have other kids speak up.
And one thing you're talking about is that being uncomfortable, like a lot of things, like my football coaches, you have to be uncomfortable to be comfortable.
Yeah.
Like, you're not just, being comfortable isn't going to get you anywhere.
Right.
If you're going to, being comfortable is not speaking up for yourself, sitting in the corner, not telling the teacher you need your accommodations.
Right.
You have to be uncomfortable, therefore to be comfortable, to be able to have not an easier time, but a level playing field as everyone else.
That's right. So in our transition classes, one of the things my kids had to do is they had to have 2 conferences with teachers. And there's 2 reasons why I think you might be frustrated in a class. It might be the content. Wow, this is WAP. That's a hard class, right? Or it might be, I have a teacher that I don't know that we get along. And I'm like, all right, those are your 2 teachers we're going to have a conference with. I taught my kids how to advocate. I taught them how to be empowered, but I also coached my teachers. Hey, Asher's coming to your class this afternoon to talk to you about his disability. That will be a place of vulnerability. Please make sure that you are making that space comfortable so that the 2 of you can talk about his accommodations. So the teacher was supported and ready. She wasn't caught off guard, and the student was prepared on how to have that conversation. And that's how that relationship and connection starts, especially at high school. We want to wean away from our parents. We want our high school kids to start owning what they need so they're ready for after high school. The other cool thing is I'd watch my high school students their freshman year come in timid, embarrassed, shy. And then their junior year, they had a piece inside the 504 meeting or the art meeting, and they had to say what their needs were, how the accommodations were working, and where they saw themselves next year. That's confidence.
Yeah, and I feel like that's kind of, I'd probably say the same thing with me, but I'm a sophomore, I'm not a junior.
Yeah, you're ready.
Like last year, I wouldn't say I was shy, but I would still talk to my teachers.
Mm-hmm.
But I think we only had one 504 meeting the whole year because the teachers were doing what they're supposed to. They were keeping up my accommodations. I was reminding them if they were to forget, and there was no problems. So there was there was no place for me to be. Well, there's the place for me to be there, but I didn't have to really speak up and tell them, hey, I really need this, because they were already doing it. But I feel like this year I've kind of gained a lot more confidence to speak up and just tell, not for myself but for others, that you really need this just to be successful.
I told my students, I said, you deserve your knowledge. and you deserve access to your intelligence. So I want you to advocate for yourself because this is to your benefit. So we don't need to be embarrassed. We want to be confident and we want to go into that. So I agree with you. And you know, you have your dad. So you've been able, parents, both of your parents have been advocating for you. So what I love about this show is maybe you're going to encourage some kids out there who maybe their parents are still learning, or maybe they're not dyslexic, or they don't know how to speak up, or they're not as involved. And now the kids can say, hey, wait a minute, I can do this on my own. Yeah, you can work with your school, work with your teachers, find that counselor, find that dyslexia teacher who can help you advocate for yourself.
Yeah, and I feel like for a lot of, I guess, underclassmen in high school, it can be very intimidating because a lot of us do not. You don't want to talk to your teacher during class because it's too much of too much attention on yourself.
I agree.
And a lot of times the teachers will they don't do it on purpose, but they're a lot louder during the class.
Right.
So you don't want your teacher talking about your accommodations the whole class.
I know.
That is very embarrassing.
I had a student come in one time and said, Mrs. D, she went in for the whole class, said, hey, do you want your note exchange right now or on my desk? Mrs. D. And I was like, I'm so sorry. The teacher was trying her best to like, hey, I didn't forget.
Yeah.
But for my student, it was.
Yeah, and a lot of times for us, it's a lot easier for you just to tell them, hey, stay after class. And it only takes about a couple seconds to just hand it to you, say, I didn't forget, here you go. Instead of having that whole embarrassment and possibly ruining the rest of their day.
Right.
Because of you were doing the right thing, but it was just at the wrong time.
So here's what I ask my students, because that transition class, again, I help train my students in both directions. I said, wasn't that the same teacher that gave you grace when your paper was 3 days late? It's like, so we're going to give her some grace too, because she was trying to support you, but she didn't do it in a way that you asked. So I want to make sure that communication's there. Let's go talk to her. And of course the teacher's like, I am so sorry. So the teachers are trying their best. They've got sometimes 150 to 180 students with maybe 40 kids on a 504 plan. So I want our teachers to know you. And so I tell my kids, that's on you. I want you advocating for yourself. I also ask them to schedule a routine tutorial time with those teachers, either the content or the connection. I want you to see that teacher regularly. So that way when you are in a bind, like, this assignment's overwhelming me, the teacher already knows you try hard and you care. So making those relationships, and I will fully agree, there's always the teacher here or there that are more challenging to work with, right? They see maybe these kids are just not putting out the right effort, or they've been enabled, or they just want it handed to them.
Or like another thing I've heard, like they use it as a crutch.
They use it as you hear that all the time. And so actually, okay, I'll tangent just a little story. AVID is a program that gets kids ready for college, and the AVID teacher was across the hall from me. And I had a pumpkin that I was like, this kid's ready for AVID. And the teacher, out of love, loves me. She said, you know, Nancy, we don't really enable kids in here. I was like, wow, okay. Because I know it came from a place from love, like we respect one another. I had to really analyze my class. Do I enable kids? Is that what the school thinks I do? And then I came back and I said, you know what? My students, some of them are reading at a 3rd grade level. If you think of high school as a hospital, my room's ICU. Your room is physical therapy. And if I've got a kid who's ready to come to your class, I empower kids. And so that was the first time we had a different understanding. And she said, Nancy, I had no idea what your kids were struggling that much. And I said, because intellectually they're not, but interacting with print, they are. So it was like an eye-opener, and she's a fantastic teacher that advocates for kids, and she had just not seen it from that perspective. So you're right. We are making awareness so teachers see it differently.
Yeah, like a lot of kids with dyslexia you may not think that anything's wrong with them just by the way they might interact with you. You might think they are above average just the way they interact with you.
Absolutely.
But then once you look at them on paper, you're like, something doesn't add up here.
It's unexpected.
Because a lot of them weren't able to, were either late identified like me. You know, I was going in freshman year on a 3rd grade reading level. They were late identified, didn't have the right tools to learn how to read, and that pretty much sets them up. And then you do so good at school, and then all of a sudden one day
Right.
you're failing.
You're able to compensate because your intelligence and also because your verbal skills, conversation skills, they wouldn't suspect it. The other person that we talk about being in our circle of support is the librarians. They're not a teacher of record and they don't know. You came into the library and all of a sudden you're playing tag. Asher, get a book. Asher, get a book, right? We know you're smart. We know you come from a good family. Why aren't you getting a book? Well, our librarians can be another layer of, we have a letter through Region 10 where we ask the parents to go meet the librarian. Have your child go in there and say, hey, I might need support with audiobooks, or I have an interest in reading about science. What book do you think that would be appropriate for me? But we want our kids to be interacting with books because that increases our vocabulary and our intelligence. So we want that. We don't want to be print avoiders. So you're right. It is very unsuspecting. The librarians wouldn't suspect it. Teachers don't suspect it until they get this. You're not producing.
Yeah, and I'm pretty sure I might be mistaken, but I'm pretty sure in all the Garland high schools, at least in my high school, every single book you can get an audio book.
Okay.
And then, we get Learning Ally,
Yep.
given to us, so we can look up whatever book. We don't have to have the book.
Mm-hmm.
You want to go look up Percy Jackson? There you go.
There you go.
So
Yeah.
that's another thing that I feel like is another good thing, is that we are able to get the hard copy and then at the same time get the audio version.
I agree with you. I do better if I'm doing audiobooks with it in front of me. I prefer that too.
And that's another thing that is very beneficial to us, that we aren't being having a hard time reading the book. We can sit there and go through with the audio and read through with on the page and build the skills we need.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And one of the things that we did at our school, another area to advocate, is we had a mentor program for our dyslexia students, and we incorporated Learning Ally as a book club. And I was like, look at us being dyslexic and having a book club. But the kids could earn a cord at the end of the school year for service hours as long as it had to do with dyslexia. And we went down and mentored our high school kids, our 6th graders and our 4th graders. And the cool part about that is you forget what it felt like to be in 4th grade and struggle to read, or that STAR test kind of just making you have hives, right? And so here my high school kids were going back, and the healing that they had, they're like, Mrs. D, I forgot how much I struggled in elementary school. And I said, but you made it, didn't you? And I said, so baby, I'm letting you know you're going to make it after high school too. It feels like it's really hard and far away, but you've got it. So my high school kids that had graduated came back and talked to my high school kids about college and ways to be prepared, or even some of the CTE classes. Many of my kids went into mechanics. Not dental hygiene. What's the other one? Makeup.
Cosmetology.
Thank you. I couldn't even think of the word. So cosmetology. So my students were successful after high school and got to teach these kids. So we communicated what it felt like to be in school. And one of my, I do have to share this. It's one of the hard things about being dyslexic, but one of my students chose to mentor but teach the younger kids how to cheat. They found I won't even tell you what they taught them, but they found an app where you could cheat. So we had a whole section on our mentor program about cheating, and we talked about that they want to keep up, and I openly admitted I cheated in 3rd grade. They would put our reading groups out in the hallway, and you knew what color level you were on, and so kids were like, Nancy, you're in the violet group. I'm like, I guess my teacher's colorblind. I don't know. But what I did is I learned to bring the graders to my desk. And that's how I caught up. And I had completely forgot I did that till my kids were talking about cheating. I was like, I did it because it's not my character. I had shame. But I had more shame knowing that the other kids knew I wasn't smart. So there's all this emotional part that goes into dyslexia and how you feel. And I tell people, if you're not a singer, how would it feel like every day if teacher put a microphone up to you and said, okay, I need you to sing out the lesson, they'd be like, no, thank you. Well, we have a reading disability.
Yeah.
And we're surrounded by it all the time. We can't avoid it.
And well, you were talking about cheating. That
Resonated?
Yeah. Like I remember in 7th and 8th grade, not being able to keep up with pretty much all of my classes. It was
Yeah.
very hard for me to. You get behind in one class, and all of a sudden you're behind in all of them.
And all of them.
And then once you get caught up, you're behind.
It never ends.
It never ends. And like I remember, they would do like the trade grade or whatever, and you would trade with somebody that you were friends with, and then you would give each other the right answers, and then like get 100. And then I remember doing that all the time, and that's not just, that's in multiple classes, and that really reminded me, because I don't really do that anymore, because there's no paperwork, but I'm pretty sure most kids, even if you don't have a disability, well, especially if a disability like dyslexia or ADD, ADHD, if you have a hard time focusing on the assignment, and then all of a sudden you're behind.
So my kids, luckily we had trusted relationships, and so they started coming to me and letting me see that transparency and that vulnerability. So we started talking about it, and it's like, look guys, if you cheat, your goal is to get the assignment to your teacher, but I want you to also have integrity. So that's why we have accommodations. So let's walk through how I could have used your accommodation here so that you were still using your integrity. So the students we'd walk through. So when you have an assignment and your stomach hurts or you're getting a headache, I don't want you to think, what can I do? I want you to think, what can we do? And how do I walk you through this? That's when my kids started having their character and their self-esteem and their motivation, their independence and confidence, because they knew they could be supported at school and they could feel safe going, hey, that assignment, if I broke that down differently, and I taught them, we could do a PowerPoint. We can have an oral accommodation. We can shorten this assignment, but don't want you cheating. And so that was really powerful for our kids to walk through that, and that was vulnerable. Who wants to admit those things out loud? But we want our kids to not feel that they can't be successful, and that's what those accommodations do for them.
And one thing that I've noticed that helped me is like the extra time.
Mm-hmm.
Because I don't want to just turn in sloppy work, because I would much rather take the day or two and get 100 than turn it in the day it's due and get a 50 or get a 0 because I didn't do it. And taking that extra day, in high school we have block schedule. So I have a teacher on Monday, and then on Wednesday I have them again, and I have that 1 day gap. And sometimes, it might take from Monday to the next Monday, and that's 2 class periods, 3 class periods that you have to wait, because you just can't do it. Like it sounds like you're just being lazy, but you're not. It's like you literally cannot get around to sitting down and trying to, like, when you sit down and try to do it, something else pops up, or when you sit down and do it, you mentally just can't get it done.
And so that's when I talk about the stamina for my students. And so dyslexia are big picture thinkers. And breaking things down into parts is what they may struggle to do. And so what I slowly did with our kids is we talked about when they had their stomach hurt or they're like, Mrs. D, I can't get it done. All right. So let's take a highlighter and see what the 3 parts are. Which parts do you think you can probably get done before you go back Monday? Which part do you want to email your teacher on? What part could we do differently as an accommodation? Do you want to do that one orally and that one a PowerPoint? So my kids started learning how to break things down so that they could accomplish those bigger tasks. Because at first, I'm telling you, as soon as they'd say we have a 10-page essay that you're going to type MLA format, my kids got hives.
Yeah.
So I just started, like, you guys, we're going to accomplish this. We just have to break it down into measurable parts.
I know whenever I get essays or I have to read a story and answer questions, I always am just like, here we go again.
Spark Notes.
And then Spark Notes. And then another thing I've done is, if I'm behind on work,
Mm-hmm.
I do the work that's due first,
Mm-hmm.
and then, or the work what I do is I like on Chrome, I have everything sorted in what's the easiest that's to do the first, and then you go through and then you go to what's due the later on, that's the hardest. And one at a time, you don't even pay attention to the rest of the stuff. You open a brand new browser and then you work on that. And it may take you all night long, and that's okay. Right. As long as the way I look at it is as long as I'm able to get it done and get it over with and turn it in and make sure my work is quality work and not just some mumbo jumbo. That's all that matters.
There's Ron Clark Academy, and it is an academy where teachers can go and learn how to get struggling kids where they need to be, and they empower and they're passionate and there's energy. It's just a great academy. Well, I got to hear Ron Clark speak, and someone said, well, what do you do with kids with dyslexia? And he said, oh, those kids learn that they have to work harder. And I thought, that really is a good lesson. And that's what you want to teach our kids. And, I have perseverance and I do work hard because I did have to learn that. And I like having those accommodations, but I need to receive the fact that it may take me longer or I may have to do a different strategy, but I accept that challenge for myself because I deserve the outcome that comes from it.
Yep. You have to work twice as hard to get the same amount of work done as somebody that has to work effortlessly.
But you're gaining in that.
But exactly.
You are gaining in that.
Because at some point, somebody that takes twice as long to do something, it may take you half that time to do that same project or something that maybe your boss gives you at work or your teacher gives you. And, at some point you look at it as, hey, I've been doing this stuff my whole life. This is easy.
That's right.
And somebody that hasn't had that pressure of always being under load is just going to crumble, and you're going to deal with it like every other day because it is every other day you're overloaded with work.
And eventually you're going to in your professional life, you're going to be surrounded in the areas where you're most natural. And so I do interact with reading, but for a living, I'm not a lawyer where I have to read all the time, right? So you choose a profession that heightens your natural abilities.
Like I know a lot of people with dyslexia always go to some sort of field that you don't have to read, because why would they want to go to a field where they have to read and they have to relive all the pain that they've gone through? And if they do go to a field that they read, that's kudos to you, because because you've taken what you've struggled in and you're okay with doing that.
That's
but a lot of people will go the opposite direction because they do not want to have to go through that again.
And there's a lot of entrepreneurs that are dyslexic. And what I find to be creative about that is they find a way to solve the problem with a creative, innovative solution. And that's what I find very characteristic of students with dyslexia.
And like I've noticed, I'm in a AP computer science class, and I think now, because since the beginning of quarantine, when school shut down, spring break, I was doing pretty good, and then I stopped doing anything with code for 8 months, and then beginning of school year, it was I was doing good, and then plummet. It was, but I think now I'm getting back into used to being able. But code is all memorization. It's all if you miss a capital letter, it's wrong.
Right.
If you miss a semicolon, it's wrong.
Yes.
And I feel like that's something that I've had to get used to, is having to always remember and problem solve, because you get an error, you have no idea what that is.
That's right.
And that's kind of how you live. Everyone with dyslexia lives their life. You have an error, you don't know what's going on, but something's going on. You have to go figure that out.
So be confident when you're doing that instead of shutting down, which is what I think a lot of us do. We used to shut down, oh no, what's wrong? And now I'm I'll get this. I'll solve
I think
it.
the older you get, the more confident you get with just your schoolwork and any other type of work you have to do.
I'm going to even change that, because I don't know if it's older, because look how young you are. I think it's when you are aware of what dyslexia really is and you start getting empowered yourself, that's the confidence. And I've seen my little second graders be like, bam, I have dyslexia. And I'm like, all right, yeah. So I think it's when you finally accept it for yourself and recognize what you need to do for yourself. That's when I see that confidence, for sure.
So another thing I wanted to ask is, what is your call to action for the people viewing the show?
You know, my most important thing is I especially being a high school teacher and seeing kids who did not appropriately get supported. They were identified later or they did not get the right accommodations. The secondary characteristics of dyslexia, which I think is anxiety and low self-esteem and dependence, I want to make sure that we have an awareness out there of early identification so kids build independence and confidence. That is my mission right now for my students. And I do believe, like we just said, Asher, when kids actually recognize what it is, own what they need for themselves, that empowerment, then they go and advocate and get what they need from a teacher or from their parents. And so this show right here and what your dad and mom have done to empower parents and for them to educate themselves, that's the message. We want more people to be aware of how dyslexia and how many kids, like schools are always talking about school improvement. What do we need to do? Dyslexia kids. I mean, that's where we can find, we have research that shows that this is a pipeline to prison because these kids are struggling to read. It changes their profession, their outcomes. So early identification, awareness, empowerment for dyslexia is what I call to action for everyone. So hats off to you, Asher, for what you're doing.
Yeah, and I was gonna put in there, like, if it wasn't for me getting remediation, I would be in the same situation.
Right.
Maybe not. Maybe, there's no telling. But I would probably say I'd be in the same situation. I'm a sophomore. I'd probably want to drop out next year or the year after that. And then there's no telling what I would be doing because I wasn't able to read. Once you're not able to read, what else are you going to do? If you
Right.
can't read, you're going to be behind so much more than you are for people that are going to be able to read. And this isn't just one kid out of 50. This is 1 in 5, sorry. So that's 20% of your school population. If you have a school of 2,700 kids, I don't know, I can't do the math.
Wow, you're going to do the math.
But that's
a
probably,
lot of kids.
That's if you have 1,000 kids, that's 200. I think. I don't know.
To get a calculator.
But still, you have a large population of kids with a learning disability that majority of them do not know. And those are the same kids, majority of them I should say, are the kids that drop out and the kids that are failing. A lot of the kids play on sports, basketball, football, baseball, you name it, they are on those teams and they are amazing athletes. But even the coaches are like, are you lazy? Like, why are your grades so bad? It's not that they're lazy, they just don't. They are trying their hardest, but then when they call it they're lazy, they just give up.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's one thing that we need to fix is that stop calling, because a lot of coaches are brutally honest. They're just going to tell you straight up. They're going to be like, are you lazy? And I feel like we need to stop asking, are you lazy, and ask, do you need help?
Right.
Because I feel like that would be that will help the kids not want to go quit school.
That's right. We want the adults in your life, when we see a behavior, we need to ask the right questions so we get them the help they need.
Because a lot of times, if you're already discouraged yourself because you're not able to finish something and somebody asks you, what are you doing? Are you on task? Are you being lazy? Are you this, that, and the other? You're already at the point where you want to quit, and that's just going to send you right over the edge, and you're going to quit. So yeah, that is one of my messages, that we need to go to the root of, I guess you could say, the problem, which is teaching the kids how to read. Because once you know how to read, then you won't have the problem down the line. You need to start, because once you start in high school, that's too late. That's too late. I think you need to start in elementary school, first, second grade, make sure they know how to read, and then you won't have the same problems down the line. Your schools will be performing better, then you will be getting more funding because your school is performing better. So therefore you have more extracurricular activities for your students, and everyone else will be more happier than if your school is failing.
Right.
The administration will be happier, the teachers will be happier, the students will be happier. Everyone's happy because everyone's passing their classes and not failing. So that is all the time we have today. Thank you, Ms. Nancy Disterlic, for joining us. Please make sure to like us on Facebook, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and leave comments. Any questions, we will get back to you and answer your questions on YouTube, Facebook. And as a student with dyslexia, I didn't understand why I was struggling so much in school. If you are struggling in school and you do not know why, please tell your parents, ask a teacher, ask them to get you tested as soon as possible. Knowing is only half the battle. We cannot stress enough. Early detection is key to their success. We have an evaluation letter template on our website at www.empowerdyslexia.info, as well as a list of events, tips, and for parents that may have a student with dyslexia or may think having concerns that they have a student with dyslexia. Thank you for tuning in. See you next time.
Learning Ally is a proud sponsor of the Empowered Dyslexia podcast. At Learning Ally, we are always looking for new ways to engage readers struggling with a reading deficit like dyslexia and help them work to their potential. Visit www.learningally.org to learn about the Learning Ally audiobook solution, including which of your students are eligible for access. If you live in Texas, we have great news. The Texas Education Agency provides access to the Learning Ally audiobook solution for all K-12 public and charter school students with reading deficits. Get started today by visiting www.learningally.org/Texas.